Dude, let me tell you about my pet rock thing that I did, like a pet rock, and then we'll talk about Canary and the Ponzi scheme, and
Yeah.
how we got fucked out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But first,
In this episode, I talked to Nick O'Hara, a serial entrepreneur who grew multiple companies and grew his TikTok following to over 150 million views in just a single year. Nick and I talk about how he convinced David Dobrik, the famous YouTuber, to work with him, how he made homemade explosives and one shot off in his eye, how he grew such a massive TikTok following in such a short amount of time, and both his warnings and advice to new content creators, as well as how one of his business investors literally got pulled off a plane and arrested for a Ponzi scheme. This episode has some great advice and some funny stories, so you're going to want to stick around and listen all the way through. And a big shout out to everyone listening. I appreciate all of you, and you're the reason why I do this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. It takes 3 seconds and means the world to me. All right, now without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So I gotta say, man, I've heard my fair share of crazy business stories, but yours definitely take the cake. I wanted to start off with the story that you told me about you, David Dobrik, the famous YouTuber, some homemade explosives, and let's just say when things went a little wrong. So I'd love if you could just tell the audience a bit about that.
yeah. So I've done a lot of engineering throughout my life, and over the last 2 years, I had done a lot of content creation. Some on YouTube, some on TikTok and Instagram. TikTok and Instagram is kind of where I found the success. But one of my first videos early on in my YouTube days was making the world's largest cap gun. So a cap gun's like the toy gun that kind of just shoots, makes a little pop noise. And I was making this world's largest cap gun. It was like 5 feet tall, 6 feet long. And I told some of my friends about it, and they were like, "Yo, you should collaborate with this dude, David Dobrik." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." I knew who he was. I didn't know him super well, and so I had made a TikTok, actually right here where we're recording, during my lunch break, back when I was working at a startup, and made the video. It took me like half an hour to film, edit it together, and then I posted it at night. And the video was basically like, "Hey, I'm building the world's largest cap gun. It's super cool. David Dobrik, if by some miracle you see this, I'll fly it out wherever you are, and it'll be super fun to play with." And he was, so I posted that TikTok at like 6 p.m. at night, and then I woke up the next morning, and he commented on the video. He was like, "Yeah, dude, let's do it. DM me." And I obviously freaked the hell out, and I was like calling everyone. I called my little sister, and so then me and a couple friends flew out to LA. We shipped the cap gun over. It cost like $1,500 to ship it to LA, and in the cap gun you have these kind of mini explosives. And so I'm not a chemist. I'm barely an engineer. I'm just kind of like I just hack stuff together. And and so there's a couple things that went wrong. First, when we were there, we were testing all the explosives. I can't remember if this is the part I told you, Jake. We were testing all the explosives, and we were in the backyard of this Airbnb we were staying at like 10 minutes from Dobrik's place. And I was just taking a hammer to kind of simulate the kind of hammer on the cap gun to hit it.
Oh, geez.
And we had these little things. I wasn't wearing safety goggles, and I hit it and I smashed it, and it kind of blew up, and I got shrapnel in my eye. And I was like, "Oh my god!" I literally just flew me and my two friends across the country for this video with David Dobrik. This potentially is like my big break. And now, like, we're in the optometrist's office because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to like see out of my eye tomorrow. So long story short, that was all okay. But yeah, and then the next day we got to Dobrik's place, and we got it all kind of set up there. And in fact, did I tell you about like actually getting it there logistically? I can't remember.
No, how do you get the world's largest cap gun across the country?
Yeah, you pay some guy named Mike to bring it over on an 18 wheeler. So yeah, this dude I had some friends who kind of run this exhibition company, and they have their own like logistical network. And they were like, "Hey, look, we'll sell this to you at cost. It costs us $1,500, but literally this guy Mike in an 18 wheeler is going to come by, and you're just going to throw it on the thing, and he's literally going to drive it across the country." And so we're not doing USPS. We're doing like Mike's delivery, and I just call Mike to see like where's the cap gun at. But David's house is on top of this like high hill, and it's kind of like these windy roads, so it's kind of tough to maneuver even just in a normal car. And we had this kind of 18 wheeler kind of bring it all the way up. And so they went, it brought it past Dobrik's house and then kind of backed it in into his driveway. And David doesn't know this, but when we did that, the driver just, because the angle of the driveway, he just kind of smashed the truck right into his driveway, just removing pavement and everything
Oh Jesus.
out of the driveway. So yeah, we're like, okay, let's not do this. So let's move it forward. And then we just kind of took it out of the truck and brought it inside. But the thing was so heavy. So it was quite the logistical challenge just trying to get it from like point A to point B. I obviously couldn't fly with it.
No guns on airplanes, right?
No guns on airplanes. So yeah, so that was that. But so then we get it set up in David's house, and David and I are talking before. I'm like, all right, this is the bit I think we should do. You kind of bring some friends in, and you say, this is a normal cap gun, and you kind of show them a normal cap gun, and then you say, behind you is the world's largest cap gun, and they turn around and we just kind of blow it off in their face, and it's super loud and it's super fun, and it's kind of like it's a cool reaction. And David was like, yeah, that sounds great. So we do that. I set up the cap gun in his house. And before his even friends arrive, I'll just say, okay, I'm going to show you just how it works. And I say, okay, this is a normal cap gun. And I do it. And then I say, like, so loudly, and this is the world's largest cap gun. And 3, 2, 1, and I pull it, and it doesn't work.
Oh, dude.
It was so embarrassing. And I was just like, fuck. Because I knew this was such a risk going into it, because, again, I made these homemade explosives. And I just watched like a YouTube video. So it was like extremely embarrassing.
That sucked. Did you end up getting it working afterwards? I think I saw the final video.
Yeah. So the final video, yeah. So then I was like, all right, wait, let me just reload real quick. And so we do it again. We reload it, and I do 3, 2, 1. We pull it. It explodes. And it was like, all right, this is awesome. So then we're like, all right, cool. We'll kind of get it up and ready for your friends to come up. So David brings up, like 20 minutes later, like 2 girlfriends, and he's kind of recording it with his DSLR. And he's walking in, and like we're behind there, and they're kind of like backing themselves in, so they can't see the cap gun. And David's recording. David's like, hey, just stand here and back in. It's like, hey, I want to show you guys this thing, whatever. And so he does this bit where he says, hey, you guys have seen these toy cap guns, right? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, all right, cool. Well, behind you is the world's largest cap gun. And I just pull the thing because I had like a quick release to have it shoot. And once again, it didn't go off. And so I was like looking at my 2 friends who were there with me. I was like, it's not working. I'm absolutely freaking out. And I'm like, all right, David, hey, no worries. Like, let's just like do it, reset. We'll do it again. Because I think David was kind of very willing to shoot, like help us, like give us another take, because he knew I flew across the whole country and everything. So we're like, all right, we'll do it again. Same thing. They go in 3, 2, 1, pull it, doesn't work. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we reset again, and we do it again, and it doesn't work. And then we reset again, it doesn't work. We did like 15 takes, and it did not work. And I am sweating my balls off, because I am like I just spent all this money on this video. I just flew across the country, and it's not working. So it was extremely stressful.
That's crazy, man. I think that this is a perfect example, though, of how in business and in life, you always have this idea of how things are going to go, and things almost never go that way.
Never.
And yeah, you just, you have to expect that that's going to happen. So factor in human error, but also that things are going to go awry, and make your plan around it. That can help you have more realistic expectations and kind of help you make better progress towards your goals, because then you won't demoralize yourself or feel bad when stuff like that happens. And then 2, you can also try to plan around it and come up with a edge case or scenarios 2, 3, and 4 for when craziness strikes, when your cap gun doesn't go off, things like that.
But yeah, like you said on the expectation stuff, like I went in there thinking that this was going to take like 20 minutes. We would get there, get the cap gun inside. I have a family group chat with my family, and I was even like, all right, guys, this is going to be easy. Like we go there, we show them, we kind of shoot it, they record it, we record it, and like we're kind of done and we're out of there. But it took like 4 or 5 hours to film. Like we're at his house for like the whole day. And by the way, there was like influencers running around everywhere recording stuff too. It was like the wackiest thing ever. Um, but then too on the redundancy, like on like the being prepared part, I had every redundancy ready. The issue was that the only redundancy I didn't have was the actual caps, the explosives, because those are the only ones I didn't know how to make. Like I said, I just watched a YouTube video, and when those went wrong, I had no idea why it was happening.
That's wild, man. Yeah, I guess no matter how much you factor in, there will always be those things that you haven't. And it's just when situations like that happen, how can you learn for future situations? Like, I bet next time, if you did have a similar scenario with cap guns, I bet you would definitely make extra explosives. So it's preparing what you can, but then additionally, just accepting that sometimes you can't prepare for the unexpected and that you're just going to need to have to learn for future scenarios.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of wrap that story up, like after me and my friends were just kind of just testing and testing new things, getting it working, getting it working. We were firing off caps. They weren't making the noise; they were making the smoke, but not the noise. It was making so much smoke that we set off his fire alarm twice at his house, and I was like, "Dude, I'm so sorry." But then we finally got it working, and so the two girls we were originally filming with had to leave. So then David Dobrik brought up three of his guy friends for the first time. They hadn't seen the cap gun; they didn't know what it was happening. And so he did the bit. They kind of backed up, and then they turned around, and I pulled the gun, and it actually worked. And we got their first real reaction. So it ended up working as it needed to, which was great. But man, it was like a spiritual experience going through that thing.
Dude, that's a real make or break moment. And related to David Dobrik, didn't you also film with the famous golfer Rick Shields?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So that's like another great point to like how I did future preparation. So David Dobrik was the world's largest cap gun, and then I was golfing one day and I was like, man, how cool would it be if my golf bag shot me my golf club? Like golf bags have been the same forever. So I think it'd be really cool. And so I made this kind of crazy golf bag, this voice activated golf bag that shoots out golf clubs. So it can shoot you any club. It can shoot you a new ball as well. And if you look at Rick's video, Rick Shiels on YouTube, you can see that it also shoots you a beer. And that was like the best thing ever because he had a great time with that bit. But yeah, same thing. Like I'd made a TikTok to get in contact with Rick Shiels, and I was just like, "Yo, Rick, I'm building this cool thing. It's gonna shoot out clubs. It'd be so much fun to play with. I'll fly to England. I'm here in Boston. Like, just let me know, and I'll just come do it for you." And he was like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And so when I was going to do this video, this was back in 2021. He was like, in my head, I was like, make sure we don't have another David Dobrik situation. All the redundancies you brought for that, just bring like twice the amount of redundancies.
That's pretty funny, man. And this highlights one good point I was actually just talking to a buddy about the other day, where when you build a wide distribution with the power of the internet like you did, it
Mm,
really gives you access to people and opportunities that you might not have had otherwise. If you didn't have this presence online, you might not have had the rare opportunity of working with both David Dobrik as well as Rick Shields. So
yeah,
it just really highlights the leverage you can build with the internet nowadays
yeah.
and how you were able to take advantage of that.
Dude, and even like even to like highlight even more so, it's like when I made the David Dobrik video, which was like my first real collaboration. I think I had like two or three videos before that. I only had 1,000 YouTube subscribers, so I was no one. And when I made the Rick Shields video, I only had maybe like 5,000 YouTube subscribers. So that was when I was doing YouTube. I was only getting a couple 100,000 views. I later did TikTok. I did like 150 million views last year. That's where I had more of the success. But I think even above and beyond of just like understanding that like the internet can leverage your network in unbelievable ways. I think too is like if you build something, at least in my case, like my hypothesis was that like if I build something that would be so fun for them to play with, then they can't say no. Um, and that's kind of how it worked out. But I think when people try to get in contact with other people and kind of bat like above where they are right now, like again, 1,000 subscribers to 20 million, they think about like, I want to do this for me, like blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, how can I service you and how can I make you look great? And that's kind of the mentality I went into it with. And again, it worked with Dobrik and it worked with Rick Shiels. And then I was like, all right, this is too much. And then I kind of switched to TikTok because YouTube was costing me so much money.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that in a sec, actually. But one
Cool.
point I really want to highlight is, like you were saying, you really need a value first approach where a lot of us are me, me, me. We let our egos get in the way. But if you want to succeed, if you want other people to be more open to the opportunities you're acting on, you need to think about them, put yourself in their shoes, and figure out how you can provide for them instead of solely just thinking about yourself and your needs.
100%. Like David Dobrik wouldn't have given a shit about the golf bag that shoots out golf clubs, right? Rick Shiels doesn't know what the hell to do with a cap gun. But like these were so tailored to them that like again they couldn't say no. Uh and yeah, and it worked out. But again, extremely expensive. Like the Dobrik video cost me like 10K. The Rick Shiels video cost me like 15K. And again, that's to build the thing, and then that's to like ship it there and kind of do all the logistical things too. But yeah, agreed. Think of how you can add values to others, whether it's a content collaboration or it's starting a company. Excuse me.
And related to all the logistics, one other point I just want to highlight is that you put in a ton of upfront work, a lot more than anyone else would have. Nowadays, so many people are seeking that instant gratification. Just how can I get that quick win? But for you to outperform the competition, you just have to put in that extra work that others aren't willing to. So the more you can become comfortable with putting in that extra work, going that extra mile, the more easily you can get ahead of the pack. And it really isn't as tough as it seems. You just need to be willing to go a few extra steps. So,
Totally.
for all the listeners, I recommend whatever you're doing, just think to yourself, how can I take this just one step further than everyone else is willing to do? And then after that, you can focus on getting even more distance from the pack, but just try to have the mindset of what extra work am I willing to do that others aren't? That's what's going to help you stand out and help you succeed.
Totally. And I'd also like to mention too of like when I was doing my YouTube days, it was make a whole thing, make a whole video, collaborate with David Dobrik, and then post a video, and that would take like 2 months. And it was such a grind, and I just kind of grinded 24/7, and I wasn't seeing friends as much, I wasn't seeing family as much. I think I was probably not as like mentally happy. And
Hmm.
so I totally agree, go the extra step, but also if that extra step, if you grind, could take a week, spend 2 or 3 weeks doing it so you can like actually enjoy your life. And that's something for the first year of content I was not doing. There was no balance.
Yeah, and you highlight a good point, which I want to dive deeper into in a second. But one point I just want to piggyback off of is, like Nick is saying, go the extra mile, but set realistic expectations for a timeline. You don't need to achieve your goal in 1 week and stress yourself out and hate yourself if you can get the same results in 3 weeks and actually enjoy your life. Reaching your full potential is a lot about excelling in all areas of life. And to do that, that means that you can still hit your goals, but maybe you just take a little bit more time to work towards other areas that are important to you too. So just family relationships and things like that. So work hard, but adjust your goals and realize these deadlines you set for yourself. Are these real deadlines? Or can you push them back a little bit without extreme negative repercussions?
100%. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. And then one more thing on the topic of YouTube versus TikTok and you talking about burnout and not really enjoying life as much. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit more about that, about how you may have reached burnout and the flip side of being this amazing content creator. Because when a lot of people hear about you working with Dobrik, you working with Rick Shields, how you have close to 6 million likes on your TikTok, they think, wow, Nick is really killing it, and they might glamorize it. But you and
Mm,
I both know that there's pros and cons to everything you do. And being a successful content creator isn't always as cracked up as people make it. So I wanted to see if you could give people some insight into both the good and the bad.
yeah, yeah. So I can highlight the good, and then I have a lot to say about the bad. So the good is that it's fun at times. You get to build. In my case, it was the engineering kind of content area, so I got to build whatever I wanted to build. I got to really just make cool things, interact with cool people. Once I went to TikTok and Instagram, I was getting tens of millions of views a month sometimes, and it felt great. Like you had this crazy serotonin just hit after hit after hit after hit. Um, but but yeah, I mean that's really the good side of things. Like the collaborations, the cool stuff building, and like the millions of views and like the flex to like people sometimes. But then on the flip side, you kind of realize that all of this is like extremely superficial and like what is a like? Who are these people watching this video? Who are these people liking it and commenting on it? So many times people will say like your content sucks. My first TikTok video, I had made a phone device where I can put my phone on top of it, and every time I pick it up, it donates money to charity in hopes of me kind of combating my own phone addiction. And the comments on that video were like, "Wow, this dude hates charity," and it's like, okay, like what are you talking about? I'm just trying to fight phone addiction, and I'm trying to have like a somewhat positive effect after that because of what I'm trying to do. So that's like an interesting take of just like the trolls online. Um,
One
and
one note on that. One note on that. I also just want to highlight the fact that in your example, it goes to show that no matter what you do, there will always be haters. You were literally talking about mental health and donating money to charity, and people found a way to kind of, I guess, shit on you for it. So
100%.
it's like, don't let the haters get to you. They will always be there. You have to live your truth and live your life, because there will always be someone who can find something wrong with what you're doing.
Yeah, the haters are always going to hate, and it doesn't matter what you do. Like there will always be something to hate about it. And so yeah, that was like an unfortunate part. You know, it's kind of sad to see how immature these online communities can actually be. Um, but you know, over and above that too, just even just looking like more about my own life for how I would have to make content. It's creating content's like running on a treadmill. You set a speed, and then once you set that speed, you do not want to deviate from it. And what I mean by that is maybe every week on TikTok I was posting 3 times. Well, once I kind of set that cadence and my audience kind of gets used to that, then like I can't slow down because they're gonna be asking why there not more videos, like what's going on, and even more importantly, like you become a slave to the TikTok algorithm or the Instagram algorithm, where if you kind of deviate from your normal upload schedule, they're not pushing your content as much. I did this series where I made a pneumatic powered guillotine just to like chop stuff. Basically, I took a potato can and I kind of turned it upside down, attached a guillotine blade to it, and it was on kind of these like rails and it would shoot down and break shit. And it was awesome. And when I was doing this, I was posting it all the time. I actually posted it every single day for 30 days. And like within like 30 seconds of me uploading video, it would have 100,000 views, which is a shit ton. Like that's like crazy. It's got to be some like a very high performing, high percentile content creator on TikTok. At least that's how it felt. And it felt awesome. But as soon as I slowed that down, I wasn't getting as many views. It wasn't getting pushed out as much. And so you just kind of realize that like one, the algorithm's ever changing, and two, you have to ever change with it and be like super flexible. And you have to deal with all of this like kind of feedback loops of the serotonin that I mentioned earlier of just kind of feeling so great and then you kind of feel shitty about it and you feel so great and then you kind of it gets ripped away from you and so you kind of feel bad about it again. And so it's just kind of constant battle of back and forth of trying to balance this thing that really can't be balanced.
Yeah, 2 points on that. One, it really goes to show that if you want to succeed in the long run, you need to be willing to consistently learn and adapt. Where a lot of people will pick an area they want to succeed in and they think, okay, I just have to get good at this and then I'll be good to go. But the truth is, you need to pick an area that you're willing to continuously learn in the long run. There's no way to get around the fact that things will constantly change and you have to adapt with the competition as well as the algorithm. And then, like you were mentioning, there are the ebbs and flows. And you really need to factor this in and take those into account when you're deciding if what you're working on is something that you're willing to continuously work on. Are the ebbs and flows worth it for you? Or do you keep pushing through, expecting the downside to eventually just disappear?
Yeah, exactly. And one more thing with the downside is that eventually you kind of start having this internal discussion with yourself of am I making what I want to make or am I making what I think my audience wants to see? And it's so sad when you realize that you're making stuff that you want your audience to see, because then like the creativity outlet that this once was for me is now just again a slave to algorithms, to what I think people want to see. And that's extremely upsetting. And so I kind of realized, I did this scooter project where I made this kind of electric scooter that you see people kind of using these days around Boston and other major cities. I made it completely remote controlled, and then I strapped 200 fireworks onto it, um, which was just ridiculous in and of itself. But you kind of realize that, like, okay, I'm making this thing and I'm recording myself and I'm pretending to have fun because I think that's what people want to see. And it's hard engineering problems, but I'm really not even having fun building this thing. And so then I'm like, okay, well, now these people, my audience is watching it, thinking that I'm having fun. And you can't help but think that sometimes people compare yourself to me or to other people and being like, oh, I wish I was in Nick's position. And I feel like maybe some of them were actually kind of looking at their lives and being like, oh, it's not as cool as Nick's. And so you have me who's building stuff that I don't want to build, pretending to be happy, but I'm not happy. And then you have people watching it who want to be inspired or something, but maybe they're actually not really happy. And so it's like, okay, I'm not happy making it. You're not happy watching it. Like, what the fuck am I doing?
Dude, it's so true, and it's definitely a negative cycle where one, you start to create content you don't even like, and then two, just the point you made, which I really want to emphasize, is that we all fall into the habit of looking at others online and glamorizing their lives, but you're looking at this facade or this specific angle people are presenting to you and comparing it to your lowest points. But the reality is that what you see online is not everyone's day-to-day life, and you're also doing a lot better than you think you are. You're comparing two opposite points, and it can really cause you to beat yourself up and unnecessarily get down on yourself.
Yeah, totally. Most people are doing way better than they think. But again, social media is meant to be viral. And the end game to virality is extremism. And so it's people who are super happy. It's people who are super depressed. It's these crazy inventions. It's the world's largest cap gun. It's a golf bag that shoots out golf clubs. And it's virality and it's extreme. And that's kind of, in my opinion, where I think it goes. Just kind of one more note on this. One maybe thing positive to end on. And I am actually, even before I started content creation, I've always kind of been anti social media. I was hoping I could be a more like bright light in social media, and I'm not sure if I was or not. But um, I was at a diner one time, and the chef, I guess, had recognized me because his daughter watched my content, and he had told me that she loved to like see the engineering process and to see how I made things and kind of what ridiculous things were going to happen. And he actually asked me to like send her a video saying hi, and that was really cool. So I think there's a lot of bad. I think it's likely like a net negative for society, but I think there are parts of it which can be cool. And yeah, I was really happy to have that experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it goes back to what we were saying about distribution, where everything has its pros and cons. The internet, social media gives you the ability to have wide distribution to make a positive impact. And you need to just balance it out with the negative aspects, such as us glamorizing other people's success. So, with anything you do, not just content creation, it's important to weigh both the pros and cons and just decide for yourself, for this unique thing I'm doing, do the pros outweigh the cons for me?
Yep, yeah, exactly.
A couple questions on this. I know you switched from YouTube to TikTok creation. I wanted to hear a little bit more about why you decided to do that.
Yeah, yeah, it was a couple things. First and foremost, it was the extreme like work uh, attitude I had towards YouTube, in that I thought that I was only making progress when I was releasing videos. And so if you build these kind of complex engineering builds, for example, I made a robot that plays Guitar Hero whose name is John Bot Jovi. And when you make something like John Bot Jovi, it's extremely technical, and it took me maybe like 6 weeks to build and figure out, and then make the whole video. And so every 2 months, I'm posting a video. And what kind of content creator am I if I'm posting a video once every 2 months? I kind of figured that that wasn't a frequent enough cadence. But because of that, again, I wasn't seeing like my friends as much, and or family, and because I was just kind of so like laser focused on this kind of one goal. And so I figured if I went to shorter form content, I could post multiple times a week. I wouldn't feel as stressed if I was in the middle of a build and it wasn't working as much because I would have kind of shown my audience how I'm building it as I go. And so if I'm in a snag or something like that, like I can actually post about it. Um, and I might even get comments that are like helping me to how I can build it. And so I figured it would give me a lot less stress and freedom to feel like I can go spend more time with friends and family and not be kind of cooped up in my studio, just kind of building a thing. And that was the case, which was really awesome. That was the main reason. And then, one more reason alongside that was I wanted people to feel like as I was building stuff, as I was getting really excited about stuff, because I get super pumped when something works. Like when John Bot Jovi worked for the first time, I like freaked out. I was running around. I was like, oh my God, this is so sick. And I didn't get to share that moment with people because I wasn't recording it. I was like, this isn't going to fit in the broader script of what I'm building for this YouTube video. So I felt like my inventions could be kind of me and my audience's inventions, and we could kind of build it together, and they could kind of feel like they're along for the ride.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a way to be more engaged with your audience. And then additionally, you found content creation styles that fit your personality and interests, where there might be someone who likes to really craft a long video, put in a ton of work, and maybe once every month or every other month is okay for them. Whereas you wanted to bring your viewers along the journey with you. And you liked also being able to capture all those small moments and the emotions you were experiencing. And I think that this is a useful tip for others where I know a lot of people think, oh, what should I do? Should I make a podcast, a YouTube channel, TikTok? I think for just getting started, it's helpful for people to examine themselves and what type of content they like to make. Do you like to talk? Do you like to be on camera? Do you enjoy writing? And because finding what you enjoy doing will help you stick it through in the long run. And that's where you're going to pick up the skills needed to succeed by being able to consistently produce content and put work in over time.
Yeah, and I think do you like to talk? Do you not like to talk? Like all these things kind of create your like artistic view on how you want your videos to be. Mine was like I just want to copy Mark Rober, and then I'll find my own voice within that, and I feel like
Hmm.
I did. But one of my first versions of me making content was actually nothing with me, nothing with audio, like with my voice or anything, because I just wanted the focus to be on my creations and the art that I was creating, because I felt like that, like it would only be like high ego if I wanted to put myself into it. But then I realized that for me personally, like given my energy, it would have the highest likeliness of success if I am able to get people pumped up,
Hmm.
um, which is great. But yeah, in terms of making content, like my hypothesis is just like one thing, and that's just make shit people want to watch. Like period, end of discussion. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, it really is that simple at the end of the day. I know that there are a lot of nuances to it, but going back to providing value, if you can make content that's engaging, whether it's because you're providing useful information or you're just fun to watch or funny, then your content will eventually get the views needed.
Yep. Yeah, agreed.
One thing I want to ask a little bit more about is I know you were talking about not seeing your friends as much, the effect of content creation on your mental health. It would be great if you could dive a bit into just the burnout you were experiencing, how you knew it was time you wanted to switch perspectives, because a lot of people just view these goals and think that's the end all be all. That's when they're going to be happy. But the pursuit of success is a never ending road, and it can often be a lonely one. And when you do eventually hit these milestones, you realize that there is more to life than just a number in your bank account or follower account on your screen. So I wanted to get more about your thoughts about how you knew you were experiencing burnout and maybe what made you decide to switch your perspective on life.
Yeah. So I had retired from content at the end of 2022. I officially announced it early in 2023, but in my head, that's kind of when I did it. And the events leading up to it were two TikTok projects. One was this pneumatic powered guillotine that I told you about, which was so fun and massive success. That video series did 75 million views, so quite successful in terms of views and all. But that was massively, again, with so many views, it was very clear to me that I was relying on like my happiness based on like the views I was getting. which is never a good sign. And so I realized that every 2 to 3 minutes, I would check my phone to see how many views it's got, how many comments it got, what people were saying, what people were liking or not liking. And it became an addiction. Like it straight up, it's an addiction because you feel so good getting all these views and these likes and comments, but you realize at some point that like this actually probably isn't how like I should be getting fulfillment. Um, because who cares? I made a thing and people watch it, and who cares? And looking on the outside in, if you saw me just record my stuff in my studio, it's just me alone, just a dude, just making some stuff and chopping stuff, and it's extremely lonely from the outside looking in. Um, and so that was kind of what I had started to see with the Guillotine project. Then I got a sponsored project to make this electric scooter remote controlled and put fireworks on it. Um, and that was like a wicked hard engineering problem. I tried to have it auto balance. Long story short, I couldn't figure it out. And so I was extremely frustrated and sad that I had set out to do this very specific thing and I couldn't do it. And I would just remember like being like, I feel like I let my followers down. I feel like I let the sponsor down. I feel like I let myself down because I pride myself on being able to figure stuff out. And so that was pretty sad. But what happened when it wasn't working was the fact was that I was working like 10 times harder. And so I was working longer hours, more time, despite my new TikTok multiple posts a week. So I could see more friends and family. I was like, well, I need to figure this out. And so I'm just going to stay at the studio longer to figure it out. And so I kind of fell into that old bad habit. And I need to be around people. That's like when I'm at my happiest because I'm an extrovert. I literally just get energy when I'm with people. Um, and so I started to realize that like I need to spend more time with people. My ability to make stuff is like severely declining because one, I don't want to, and two, uh, like I just feel like I'm like losing faith in myself, all because of these expectations that I set of myself. Um, and so when it was abundantly clear that I was burnt out, it was my dad's birthday in November, and I wanted to basically just cut out a piece of acrylic, just like a square piece of acrylic on a CNC. A CNC just kind of cuts stuff out. It's like a 3D printer is additive; it creates stuff from nothing and it adds material. A CNC just removes material. So to cut out a square on a CNC is like the simplest thing in the world. It would take me like 17 seconds to do it. It's super quick. Um, and I spent multiple days trying to get myself to be able to go and cut out this square for this piece I needed for this thing I was making for my dad. And I was like, holy shit, something's horribly wrong because I can't even go cut out a square piece of plastic on my machine. And I don't even like want to do this. And so I felt like all of my creative juices were like completely gone. And I had no desire to do the work that I like once loved.
Yeah, I see a few different red flags that people can start to look for in themselves to realize if they're burning out or if they maybe need to take a step back. One, when you were feeling stressed, you felt like you just had to dive in more, put in more work, spend more time in the studio. Additionally, you couldn't get yourself mentally to put in the small amount of effort needed for a tiny task. So for someone else, it might be that they have to just send one email, but they're just dreading it and not putting in the energy needed to do it. They're just constantly thinking about it. And then additionally, on top of that, you just lost a lot of the happiness and joy that you used to have. So all these tasks, you weren't viewing them from a fun perspective. You were viewing them as a nuance or something that you had to deal with. So I think it's valuable for people to think about those things as well as look for other red flags in their lives to see if they maybe need to take a step back. In our hustle culture, it can be really easy to think that you just have to do more to succeed, show more discipline, put more grit in. But you are human. Humans do need breaks, they do need rest, and we also do need community. And if you want to succeed more in the long run, you'll do better by giving yourself the rest and restoration you need than by just trying to bite down and keep working even harder. Because eventually you will burn out. Success in life is a marathon, not a sprint. And we need to remember that.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And that's why I retired from content because it was going to make me just like unable to do anything. And my background is in entrepreneurship, and I know I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to want to start another company someday. I was working at a startup at that same time, feeling burnt out from that as well. And so I retired from content, and I quit the job I was at. And those two things allowed me to really take a step back and really start to think, okay, like what do I need to do? How can I get over this? Start seeing a therapist. That's been awesome for a while, and even sometimes still now, like considering various medication for anxiety. That's kind of one of the symptoms I had as a result of this kind of like extreme burnout, just having panic attacks randomly sometimes. And, I'm not sure if it was like a serotonin, like having all the serotonin and having like none, and the highs that were super high are now like not coming. And so my body's like, what the hell's going on? But yeah, all these things are so important, just to take care of yourself. But seeing a therapist has been amazing for me. I obviously recommend it. And then, if people feel like they need medication, I think that's great too. Um, but yeah, it takes time to recover from that. And it's been like 6 months or so since the content stuff and since I've stopped that. And I'm still like not 100%. And it just takes so much time. But again, being aware of it and being able to take the necessary steps to do it is so important. Like, as I said earlier, I did 150 million views like last year in like a 6 month period. It was working extremely well. I was getting tons of followers. I had like 330,000 on TikTok, over 100,000 on Instagram. Could have kept growing, but again, chose my own mental health and well being over these kind of made up numbers online. So, recommend people do the same.
Yeah, I really respect that. It takes a lot of courage and self belief to prioritize what you know is important, despite society really telling you, oh, like you're successful. Look at your follower account. Look at how big you are. But you know your internal metrics for success and what really makes you happy. And I think that that can be very tough, but it's a sign of a mature person who knows themselves to be able to take a step back and decide for themselves what success is versus just taking the definition of success that's handed to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I only have sympathy for some of these larger content creators, because again, it's hard not to fall into that trap. And also worth noting that engineering content doesn't scale well because you have to build these crazy things all the time. If I was just a comedian, like it might be a lot easier and I could just record my stand up bits, but all the things still apply. And you just have to kind of be careful and really be honest with yourself about why you're enjoying doing it, and look out for the common pitfalls, like I mentioned.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing these vulnerable moments. It really shows people that you are human, that everyone, no matter what they achieved, has their own vulnerabilities, weaknesses, things that make them human as well. And related to this topic, I wanted to see if you could tell people about the other businesses that you've started, kind of why you might have transitioned from doing them to the next one, and then work your way up to Canary and the Ponzi scheme that we talked about. But the main point, the main point I just want to make is that again, we all are human. No one has 100% at bats, and for you to have that home run, you are going to get a few strikes along the way, and you just need to keep working until your big breakthrough does come through.
Totally, yeah, totally. And just for context too, the all the companies I'd started were right before content. So I kind of finished all those and then kind of went into the content world. But yeah, I mean, I started, and I'll kind of go quick through some of them, and just kind of highlight what it was, why it failed, and why I thought it was time to move on. So, first business I had was when I was 15. I would fix broken iPhones, and so if you cracked your screen or you wanted a new battery, I could fix that for you. So I did that for like maybe 2 or 3 years, just kind of passively, as like friends would text me. Started with just friends, and then their friends, and then I would just give everyone like 5 business cards. So I was like, hey, if you know anyone who needs a screen fix, like please give them my card. It would mean the world to me. Um, and so you make a couple $1,000s a month when you're like 16 years old, and you feel like extremely wealthy. So that was cool. That was like a fun thing. And then when I went off to college, I just stopped doing that, because I wanted to like learn more with with meet new people, and learn more with Bryant University, the business school I went to. So that was like kind of like a cool, fun first business. And then at Bryant, I met some guys, and we created this thing called Hearsay Today, which was a way of delivering audio news to you via text messages. And this was in 2013. So this was way before podcasts were like extremely popular. This was before, like these quick snippets of audio news that you can get today. And so I developed our app. I taught myself how to code around this time, developed an iOS app, and we would upload these audio files and we would send them out to people. And we had like 10 or 12 reporters working for us, reporters in quotes, because they were all college students who were communication majors. And no one really knew what the hell they were doing. They didn't have proper audio equipment, but that failed just because no one wanted it, I don't think. And also, we were like 18, and that's not really like a good excuse, but we didn't do the proper research and understanding for like how to execute and how to go to market. We were so concerned with how do we build the thing that we didn't actually think about, like, one, do people like want this, and two, like, how are we going to tell those people who might want it that this thing exists? And I think that's like a huge thing for people to think about when they start something, is the go to market strategy. Would you agree, Jake?
Yeah, I think that that's huge, where a lot of people who are new to entrepreneurship can really get caught up in an idea. This is my baby. This is going to be $1 billion idea, but they don't think about the execution aspect. And no matter how great the idea is, if no one can hear about it or get it in their hands, then you're not going to be able to sell. And then also importantly, you're not going to be able to get any feedback. One thing that experienced entrepreneurs learn that beginner entrepreneurs often don't factor in is that the quicker you can release and start to get feedback, the more you can iterate on things and the more you will actually know what customers want instead of going based strictly off your assumptions. So get out and iterate as quickly and ghetto as possible. Whenever I'm going to do something, I'll ask myself, is there an easier way, a more ghetto way? Just that way I can kind of get things out and start to actually get feedback versus just holding my ideas inside and building strictly based off assumptions. More assumptions equals more risks, and you want to minimize risk wherever possible in business.
Yeah, totally. And your job is to definitely say, okay, I have this hypothesis, right? Well, let me talk about the next thing. I can tell you the hypothesis I had. But basically, your job is to say, I have this hypothesis, and you want to prove or disprove it as quickly as possible. Um, and so that's kind of what I thought of after. So here's today we stopped doing that because we were like, all right, this isn't getting any traction. Like, let's just stop because we feel like we're wasting our time. That was after like 8 months or something. Uh, and then I created this thing called the charging chair. It's a beach chair that charges your smartphone. And this also failed. So this is kind of three failures in a row. I guess the iPhone business was like, okay, but three failures in the sense that it didn't make me a ton of money. Um, and my hypothesis was that when I go to the beach, my phone always dies. And this was in 2014, so portable chargers weren't as popular. So if I make a beach chair that charges your smartphone, it would be kind of cool and convenient, and people would buy it. And so I developed the prototype. I had put in like $3,000 into it. I had hired a guy over in Ohio to create the prototype for me. Kind of put it in my school, like in my university's like main area where students are walking by. Would have students come by, sit down, check it out. Hey, is it comfortable? Hey, what do you like? Hey, what do you don't like? Would you buy it? How much money would you pay for it? And so I collected all this data, and then I went and launched a Kickstarter. And my goal was $50,000 for our minimum order quantity to actually get these in production. And so we ended up only raising like $7,500. And so I was like, okay, I feel like I did an adequate job marketing this to like people, creating a big email list, all these things. Um, and no one bought it. And I think that's okay. And I think at that point I was like, all right, I think I've done a decent job like showing people this thing. And I think I've kind of proven that people don't want it. Which kind of sucked. But again, I was like, at that point, I was like maybe 19 or 20. So I was like, it's okay. I still have a lot more time.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a buddy a little while back about how, despite popular belief, the average entrepreneur who launches a successful business is actually closer to their late 30s, 40s. A lot of us see the the idea of a 20 something entrepreneur hitting it big, making millions of dollars. And we get that idea in our heads and we think that has to be us. And if we're not able to accomplish that, we start to beat ourselves up, get down on ourselves, say, what's wrong with me? But this is just unrealistic expectations. And that actually, again, demoralizes us and prevents our success. Whereas if you just stick through it long enough, chances are that something will work out. You just need to keep acquiring new knowledge, new connections, new resources, and have enough at bats for something to work. So I think people should, one, reframe their expectations, understand that any big goals do take time. And then I also just wanted to relate it to that, ask one question of you, which is, I know that you were going to talk about another business or two, but on those past businesses, you mentioned a few different failures in a row. What caused you or gave you the ability to persevere through all this? I know when a lot of people fail, they tend to beat themselves up and they may not try again. But despite that, you were able to push through and ended up to be able to keep doing that until you did get your big wins.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, you kind of said it. Like, you just want to have enough at bats to keep going. And I decided very early on in my life, like probably after I did the iPhone business, that all right, this is something I want to do with my life. I want to build cool stuff and I want to make an impact with people. And if I do that, then the kind of the money will follow and all that stuff. But yeah, I just decided early on that like I'm never gonna stop. I'm just gonna keep going, and it doesn't matter like how many times I fail. I'm just gonna keep going on to the next thing, into the next thing, into the next thing. And so I decided early on that like I'm gonna like be successful or I'm gonna die trying.
One point on that I just want to piggyback off of is it's funny you mentioned that because a few of my other friends who I've talked to that are multimillionaires at this point doing pretty well, they say the exact same thing where they say, I know that I'm just going to keep pursuing success and I'm either going to get there someday or I'm going to die trying. And whether that's right or wrong, there is no right or wrong. It goes to show that having that level of perseverance is able to get you closer to your goal and make you more likely to achieve it. And if you can just decide consciously, I'm just going to keep working towards my goals no matter what, then eventually you'll hit one of them. Because what tends to happen is that a lot of us will work towards our goals, but then excuses will pop into our heads and we'll let them get to us and stop working. But if you just decide ahead of time, no matter what excuse pops into my head, I'm going to keep trying to grow and achieve my goals, then the excuses are removed and you're left with strictly action. And the action is what's going to push you to achieve your goals.
Yeah, totally. And just like content, as I said, like if you want to be successful with content, like you have to make shit that people want to watch. And if you want to be successful with business, you have to make shit that people want to buy. Whether it's a SaaS company, whether it's a physical product, it doesn't matter. Like you just have to like add value. And it doesn't have to be, something that cures cancer and it could be a fidget spinner, right? It doesn't need to have this crazy need, like solve this crazy problem. It can, but it could also, it doesn't have to be like a pill. It could also just be a vitamin sometimes.
Yeah, I think we get caught up in the ideal of, oh, I need a massive painkiller. I know that that was taught to me in entrepreneurship class when I was younger. And yes, painkillers are more easily sold, but millions of dollars were made off of the pet rock. You can make a ton of money just providing something novel. So if you have a decent enough idea, it might be worth investigating more into, collecting data. Don't hold off until you find that cure for cancer, like we were talking about, because you may have something great on your hands, but you're holding off until you reach perfection.
Dude, let me tell you about my pet rock thing that I did, like a pet rock, and then we'll talk about Canary and the Ponzi scheme, and
Yeah.
how we got fucked out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But first, but first, yeah, pet rock. So the final business I had in college was this website called dirtbymail.com, where you can anonymously send a bag of dirt to a dirt bag, which is hilarious and stupid and just dumb. Um, and yeah, just kind of really stupid. I think my buddy Ryan Dolan and I were watching uh, the potato parcel on Shark Tank, and I told Ryan, who's like extremely creative and has these wonky ideas, I was like, dude, like we should be able to do something like dumber than this. Like, let's do it and let's sell it, and it'll be really funny. And so we created this thing. Like literally took like a week from like idea to like selling the first product because it was buy dirt, which was organic mulch from Home Depot, get like little satchel bags, which we could get from Alibaba, and then get business cards which that just say "You're a dirtbag" on it. Excuse me. And yeah, and so we got this. We made a bunch of them, and our go-to-market strategy was me being in college. I said, in Snapchat being such a big thing at this time, it was to say, okay, I'm gonna pick the 12 most popular kids on campus. I'm gonna send them all these dirt bags, and they're gonna Snapchat about it, and people are gonna see what's going on. And yeah, and so the marketing virality kind of aspect of it was on the experience was you open this box and you see like a bag and it says "You're a dirt bag," and then you open the bag and it's just like dirt or mulch or whatever. But on the business card it says "You're a dirt bag," and then under it it says "Know a dirt bag, dirtbymail.com." And so people could learn from it as people were posting about it because it was naturally a very kind of post about it type of experience. Um, and so, yeah, we did that. We sent it to 12 popular kids on campus, and then people started posting it on Snapchat, just like we thought. And then we started getting orders. And I'm like, holy fucking shit, this is the fucking coolest thing ever. It cost us $1, and we sold it for like $8. And so we're making $7 margins. Because our CAC was pretty good at the time because we were just shipping them to people. And yeah, dude, it was awesome. If like we were like it felt like we were like just on top of the world, making like thousands of dollars a month again in college, and in a way that kind of scales too, right? It's not directly correlated to your time, um, and like we could buy like all the beer we wanted and kind of do whatever we wanted to do, and it was like the coolest feeling ever. Um, and yeah, it was awesome. And then we started going on doing Instagram ads, not traditional ways where you have kind of these demographics and retargeting campaigns, but more just working with influencers like like Fuck Jerry or Men's Humor. That was a big account back in the day that we advertised a bunch with. And we would say, hey, we'll give you $200 or $300 to post an ad for us that just kind of said like, know someone who's a dirtbag, dirtbymail.com, anonymously send a bag of dirt to a dirtbag, whatever it was, with some like cool picture of the thing. Spend like $300, and then we'd get like $1,000 in sales, and like that's it. And then people would post about it, and then we kind of had this like secondary wave of customers who would come after they would get the bag of dirt, and when they would post about it, because since it was anonymous, Jake, if you sent me one, I'd be like, oh, who the hell sent me this? Oh, maybe it
Yeah,
was.
check your mail tomorrow, by the way.
I actually had someone send me a dirt by mail thing like 18 months ago, like 5 years after I sold the company. But yeah, so anyway, we were operating it for a while. There was the bad sides of it, which was the fact that it could be said that it was bullying, which it wasn't meant to be. It was supposed to be a stupid, funny joke. Um, and then we had this issue where an ex-boyfriend was potentially harassing this girlfriend, and so a detective called us and subpoenaed our records so that he could
Oh,
prove.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that he could prove that the ex was, one of them was harassing the other one, all this bullshit. And like, my morals, like, inside, I was like, I feel so shitty about this. Like, I said to my buddy Ryan, I was like, dude, we should just kind of get rid of this. I was graduating college. I was like, all right, we should, like, kind of go do real things. So we sold that for like $5,000 or $10,000. I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't a lot, but what were we selling really? All we were selling was like the domain and the idea, because anyone could copy us. So that was a cool one.
That's pretty cool, man. One point I just want to highlight is you, again, going back to distribution, were able to leverage the distribution and scalability of the internet. So you were able to bake virality into your offering. And by doing that, it helps your offering spread like wildfire. Where you had a cheap product, the product itself wasn't really expensive. There wasn't much functionality baked into it, but you used creativity and positioning to help your business succeed. So again, you mentioned college students. College students don't have a lot of money, and a lot of other people don't have tons of cash to spend on businesses, but don't let that stop you from pursuing your goals. You have creativity, you have energy, you have other tools at your hands and disposal. Use those tools to help you succeed. it's not a requirement to have a lot of cash to succeed in business. You can succeed despite that.
Excuse me. Yeah, 100%. You just gotta find a way, right? Like that's it. You just gotta find a way. Stop making excuses for yourself and just like go do something.
Yeah. And speaking of dirt bags, can you talk about Canary and the Ponzi scheme situation?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that was nuts. So same dude actually, Ryan Dolan, who co-founded Canary with me. So basically, I was working at Wayfair, e-commerce company in Boston as a software engineer after Dirt by Mail thing after college. Was there for like a year, and my buddy Ryan, whose family kind of owns some different restaurants and that book live music, he was like, "Hey, I'm having a hard time booking live music. I'm having a hard time finding new musicians. Like it's kind of like an unorganized process. I think there might be like an opportunity here to kind of do something." And this was like 2017 or whatever. So there were some solutions around. But I was like, all right, let's just like do it anyway because it would be fun. We'll learn. If it succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't, if it doesn't. But let's just do it for learning, and it'll be like a real life MBA program. Um, so long story short, created this platform called Canary, where that's a platform for musicians to connect with bars and restaurants in the area. We helped musicians get more gigs, and we helped bars and restaurants find new talent in their local areas, and we also helped bars and restaurants kind of stay more organized. So that was kind of like the value props to them. Um, and it was there was a lot that kind of happened. I did that for like 2 years or something like that, but raised like a small amount of money. We were advised by one of the guys from Aerosmith, Tom Hamilton, which was like a crazy story. Um, do you want me to go into that at all?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So the Tom Hamilton connection was like a friend of a friend of a friend type of connection, and I had learned about this, and then I was like, hey, can you to my connection? I was like, hey, can you please tell Tom that we're doing this thing? We're helping musicians. He's a musician. Aerosmith's a local Boston band originally. I was like, I think he might kind of be on board with this because that's kind of what musicians want to do is help other musicians. And coincidentally, that mutual connection was getting dinner with Tom that week. And so they told him about Canary on like a Friday night at dinner. And Tom was like, "Yeah, sounds cool. Like, does he want to like come over and tell me more about it?" And then I heard back, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to go to Tom's house. Like, of course, yeah." And so he's in the Boston area. I'm in the Boston area, and so I just kind of drove over, knocked on his door. He opened the door. It was him. I said, "What's up?" And I said, "Thank you so much for having me over." And I walked into his place, and it was just like platinum records on the walls, he's the bassist, tons of basses, guitars, all types of instruments. I think I saw like a Kids Choice Award or something like that. It was just like crazy. And so I got to tell him a little bit about what we were doing, how we were helping musicians. And I was like, yeah, just hey, think about it. If you want to like help advise, like I would love that, and I'd be super appreciative. But if not, I get that too. So just kind of let me know. And then 2 days later, I get a call. I look down and it's Tom Hamilton, and I'm freaking out. And he's like, "Hey man, yeah, love what you're doing. Would love to like help advise, and yeah, hope we can kind of make this thing a success." So that was just kind of like a whole crazy type of thing. I actually went back over his place later on, and we were talking about music. And I'm a musician, and obviously he's the musician. And he was like, "Oh, you want to see my studio where like I record my stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, hell fucking yeah! Like, what are we doing on your couch? Let's go to the studio." So like we like walk upstairs, and he wrote the song "Sweet Emotion," which is one of their like most famous songs. And he's showing me around his studio, and he has all these basses on the wall. He's like, "Oh, you see that bass right there? That's the bass I recorded Sweet Emotion with, decades ago." And it was just like walking through a museum. It was the coolest thing in the world. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot of cool things like that happened with Canary, meeting cool people, kind of going door to door, knocking on doors, talking to bar managers, people who book live music, meeting up with musicians. Um, and all of that was really awesome, and taught me a lot about sales and marketing and all these things. Um, Sorry, did you want to interject?
Yeah, yeah. One point I was going to say is that you make a really good point here. I know we talked about scalability and distribution earlier on, but on the flip side, when you were initially growing Canary, you also did what doesn't scale. Like Paul Graham talks about, do what doesn't scale, where you went door to door and actually approached different bars, different musicians, and worked on getting them one by one to embrace your platform. So a lot of times we think to ourselves, what's the biggest, most scalable way to do things? But again, going back to being able to get into a business as cheaply and simply as possible, find ways to do things easily, do things that don't scale, just like you did with this, as well as with mailing people dirt. So I think the bottom line for people out there who are trying to grow a business or achieve any goal, how can I start off quick and fast? That way I can start to get things going, get traction, and collect data.
Yeah, totally. And also just like learn about what your customers want. So, I think almost always it's good to kind of get a check to see if you're building something that people want, or at least help build it alongside your customers. I know Sam Altman actually recently said that he actually disagrees with some of the fundamentals because of ChatGPT. They never interviewed anyone. They just kind of built this thing that they thought people would like, and it was
Mhm.
successful. But with Canary, it being such a smaller market and very like small, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go meet with these people. I'm gonna talk with them. I'm gonna see how their processes work today, and see how we can make tech to kind of help alleviate those um, processes and make them more efficient. And yeah, that's kind of what we were able to do. But yeah, like I never even thought about how is this thing gonna scale a ton until kind of later on. It was just like, let me just build something I think people might find useful.
Yeah, taking a value first approach, like we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so basically, we keep operating Canary. Things are going decent. They're not going fantastic. They're not going horrible. Just kind of chugging along, which probably is like not the best sign in a startup anyway. But whatever. I just keep going anyway. And I'm like, all right, I want to raise some money to like help build our team and just kind of not be a one man show. Um, at this point, Ryan had decided not to continue on with Canary. And so it was kind of mostly just me, and had tried out some other people, but no people were a fit for a co-founder. So um, no, obviously no hard feelings with Ryan. He's one of my best friends, so it was all good. Didn't really care at all. No worries there. But yeah, I was alone for a bit, so I was like, all right, I want to raise some money to kind of build out a team, get some salespeople, whatever. And so I meet this guy named Tan Cabra. His full name is Tan Maya Cabra, and you can look him up after this. But um, he was like a 25-year-old. I was like 23 at the time, like 25-year-old kind of hotshot entrepreneur who claimed to have all this success and all this money. And I had kind of talked to him. He had this kind of angel fund that he had called like 100 VCs, where they were going to invest in like 100 VCs and 100 companies in like 1 year or something, like absurd, like a deal every 3 days, which doesn't happen if you're in the startup world, if you know about that stuff. But yeah, and so he was going to give us like 250K, so not a crazy amount of money, but certainly a lot of money to us at the time to be able to kind of do what we needed to do for the next like 12 months. And so I'm like, all right, cool, this sounds great. He was going to put in 200, and he had two friends who were each going to put in 25K. So that got us to 250. And I was like, all right, this is perfect. I started interviewing people, kind of waiting for the round to close. And I was like, all right, we'll be good. And while all this was happening, I was like, all right, I'm going to take my first vacation since kind of doing Canary. I'm going to go to the Cape Cod with my family, join them. It'll be kind of relaxing. With money coming in, I have some good prospects for people who I'm going to bring on. And I go to the Cape, and it's my first day. I wake up, and I get a call from one of my other investors, and they say, "Hey, do you hear what happened to Tan?" And I'm like, "No, Jesus Christ, what the hell happened?" And they were like, "He was just pulled off an airplane at Logan Airport in Boston by the Department of Justice for operating a Ponzi scheme, and he's going to get arrested." And I'm
Oh
like,
my god.
"What?" the fuck are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? I'm taking my first. This is my first day of vacation, like today, and this happens today, and so I was just like, what the fuck? I remember being so, I was so, dude, I was so pissed. I'm obviously right, like I was like, oh my god, I the huge downside with Canary was the fact that it wasn't like the newest high tech thing. I wasn't solving a new problem. I was kind of going after an older problem. There were other solutions. Like it wasn't like an investable thing. Like it was wicked hard to make money because it's not like I was like, oh, we're using AI to do this, or we're doing crypto this, or blah blah blah. I was like, we're helping bars and musicians, and people just didn't care. And so it was really hard to raise money. So I was like, we're absolutely fucked. Like we're fucked. Like we're absolutely fucked. And this was like October of 2019, something like that. Um, and so I was like, all right, well, just again, we're fucked. And I don't think that like I can go raise money quickly enough to support myself, to support people I was hoping to bring on. And so, excuse me. So what I ended up doing was I was like, okay, if we can't do this, like we were barely making any revenue too. I was like, let me, but we had like good user metrics. I was like, let me see who has access to venues, right? Instead of me going door to door, let me work smarter and go to companies that have relationships with 10 venues, 100 venues. And so I can get these 100 bars and restaurants on and increase monthly recurring revenue instead of having to go raise money. And so I went to two companies. One of them is called Gigmore. They're out in California. They're a much larger version of what Canary was. And I talked to both these companies, and I was like, all right, hey, we're doing this thing. I think we complement each other really well. You guys have access to tons of venues. We're helping venues kind of book new talent and helping them out a lot. Um, like how can we kind of get a partnership here where we're able to kind of get access to your venues but make it worth your while too. And both companies said like this only works if we acquire you. They both loved what we were doing. They loved that we were helping musicians. They loved that we were helping bars and restaurants. And just for an idea of scale, we had like 5,000 musicians or something like that in Boston. We had like 20 venues, so it wasn't that big. Um, Not making a lot of money per month. Our like gross merchandise volume, like the gig transaction fees, were maybe like a couple $100,000, but we weren't seeing any of that money. But that's just kind of like an idea for scale. Um, and so after just getting burned from Tan with this 250K, kind of going at it for 2 years and feeling like I wasn't making like a ton of progress. Um, and also like I had just had heart surgery, which was kind of just like a personal thing I was dealing with. I was like, all right, fuck yeah. Like I talked to my existing investors and I was like, guys, I think we should do this. And so we ended up selling Canary to Gigmore in December of 2019. And not only was I super grateful because um, I was able to sell this company, but I was super grateful because 3 months later, in March of 2020, COVID hit, and there was no live music, and we've been again, just like with Tan, absolutely fucked. So we got wicked lucky. We got wicked lucky with timing. And yeah, and Gigmore survives too, which was great. So and they're still doing well.
That's wild, man. Sometimes life will just throw situations or circumstances your way, and they're actually blessings in disguise. Where I'm sure when you were initially like, oh, we have to sell this business, it was kind of maybe crushing you a little bit or demoralizing, but it was actually a blessing because if you had just stayed in business till COVID, you might not have succeeded given the circumstances.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I just pulled up the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's findings on Tan, and just to kind of close that out of kind of what actually ended up happening. So he was sentenced to 21 months in prison and a 1 year of supervised release, and he was fined, or he was ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1.8 million for scamming all the investors he had scammed. So that was in September of 2021. So he's probably just about getting out right about now. Maybe he's listening.
It goes to show, man, like, don't try to screw other people over. Sooner or later, it will come back to bite you in the butt.
Yeah, 100%, man. And you know, I didn't go too much into Tan, but being such a hot shot and seeing his perceived success, that the story that he was selling, I thought to myself, like, this is the man who's gonna like make me really successful. I'm gonna learn so much from this guy. He's gonna be an unbelievable mentor. I'm so thankful I get to learn from him. Um, and I think that's a lot of that was still true. Like he obviously like screwed us over, but I still got to learn so much from him, and I still got to learn like some of the best lessons of my life, seeing, learning about all the fraud he was like doing after the fact. So even though it wasn't the way I was hoping to, like I still learned a ton from Tan, and yeah, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, it really goes to show that everyone has something to teach you. And it's just up to you to be open to the lessons and to look around and find those lessons. Don't just paint someone as black or white to let morality get in the way of your education.
Mm,
Try to view every situation as a learning experience.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
What was the experience like selling your business? I'm curious if you could give a little insights into what the process was like. Was there anything particularly stressful? Any advice to someone who might want to sell their business in the future?
Yeah, dude, it was all stressful. It was all stressful. It happened pretty quickly, actually, all things considered. Um, but basically, I had reached out to both the companies I was interested in acquiring us, and so, well, again, at the time, it wasn't for acquisition; it was for partnerships. But yeah, dude, I got LinkedIn Premium, and that was like a $20 big spend for me to do that to reach these CEOs. But obviously, it returned its investment, so I could DM them. But so yeah, so I'd reached out to some of these guys who I thought we could have good partnerships with. And so I just reached out and said, hey, I'm running this company called Canary. We're an end-to-end booking management platform for booking live musics. A lot of venues in Boston are looking for new talent, and we're looking to expand our venues. And I think it might be a good opportunity for Gigmore and Canary. And I said, yeah, I think we could just kind of add some value here. If you think it makes sense, like let's have a chat to talk more about it. And he said, hey, thanks so much. That sounds great. No, I'm sorry. He he said, "Hey Nick, thanks for your message. Gigmore and Canary are competing platforms, so I'm not sure how your suggestion would work." And he said, "Please let me know if I'm missing something." And then I basically just explained how we're different and how it could actually work together. And then we ended up talking and kind of figuring it out. But that whole process was extremely stressful because one, like I'm talking to people who I feel like are so much bigger than I am. Like they are, right? Like I'm a 23 or 24-year-old kid. They're in their 50s. They run a bigger company. They're more successful. But even more so than that, like I don't know how to negotiate. I don't know how to like do any of this stuff, and so I'm just kind of making it up as we go. And so that was for me the hardest and most stressful part. Like, how do I actually tell them like that? Like, how do I even price it? Like, if they didn't acquire us, how do I even like price it out for like the potential partnership? Um, but I think at the end of the day, it's just like, all right, like whether they say yes or say no, it doesn't matter. Just kind of take a swing at it and like just focus on providing them value. And so that was kind of my North Star as I was going through this process of, hey, we have this really cool tech platform. We're trying to expand all these cool things. It just so happened that Gigmore was looking to expand its tech platform with an app, a new web app, and mobile apps as well. And I had built those out. So that's when they had offered to buy us because they wanted the technology that Canary had built.
Yeah, man, I really respect that despite the fact of you being a 23, 24-year-old kid, like super nervous about all this, that you still took the action steps needed. Where a lot of us will have that nervousness in our gut, and it can be very easy to just freeze up or take a step back. But despite that, you push through and you were willing to figure it out as you go, like with the negotiation, for instance. And you may not get the perfect answer right away or the best results, but you're going to get a lot better results than you would have if you just sat back and let life decide for you what was going to happen.
Yeah, it's agreed. And the other guy I was talking to too was from another company as well, and it was kind of the same thing, right? Like just saying, "Hey, this is what we got. I think it could work." And like you just have to show them what the opportunity is. You're not trying to swindle someone. You're not trying to like. I believed in my heart that I built something that was valuable and that we could both make money from this. And so like it's a disservice to both me and to them if I don't say something. And despite it being scary, I just thought to myself like, okay, you're gonna call this dude, just be brave for like 10 minutes, and then after you can, you can cry, you can be whatever you're feeling, you can just curl up in a ball, you can go for a run, you can scream, like just like be brave for a few minutes and it could like change your life. And so just try it and see what happens.
It's true, man. I think that that's a great way to view things where it's like this next big decision you're about to make, it could be the thing that changes your life. Remember that anytime you're afraid of taking action or taking that small risk.
Yeah, and I also had a strong fuck it mentality as well because I had kind of mentioned earlier that like at this time I was like had heart surgery, and I that kind of changes your perspective when you're 24 years old and you're like, okay, you're having heart surgery and they're telling you that like you could have a stroke, or like if something goes wrong, like basically you could die. And so coming out of that, and everything's all good, and I'm all good now, and everything. But coming out of that, you're just like, after that surgery, I was like, wait, like this does not matter at all. And so sometimes I feel that like he who cares less in the negotiation like has the more power. Um, and I certainly went in with like not giving a shit, and I think that helped.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, man. Like, I know that we both had our open heart surgery, and I think that those are life changing experiences where it can really reframe things. Like you said, when you realize how close you are to potentially dying, it makes you realize what really matters in life. And for the listeners out there, you may not be having open heart surgery, but you can think to yourself, what would happen if I were to die tomorrow? If you realize how short life actually is, and the chances of today being your last day, it will make you appreciate things more and it will put life in more perspective. Even on days where I'm feeling great, feeling healthy, I remind myself today could be my last day. And that's just a great way to add urgency to your life, but also to let yourself fully enjoy things because you never know when things are going to come to an end.
Yeah, and just to clarify, mine was orthoscopic. I aspire to be as cool as you, Jake, but I am not quite as cool as you.
Still counts, still
Still
counts.
counts. It still
And
counts.
last question on the business stuff. Throughout these string of businesses, were there any other lessons that you learned along the way? I'm sure there were a ton, but I'm wondering if any come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. Like, I, I was always just, I always just tried to remind myself of a couple things. And the first is that, like, hey, like, life's just not that serious. I think when you raise money and it feels like you have a lot on the line, it's easy to kind of get into your own head and worry that, hey, if I lose this money, I'm completely like fucked, right? And I think it's easy to fall into a state of like thinking you're even more important than you are. And so I would always try to remind myself just kind of to give myself the freedom to be creative, because stress in starting companies and in content across the board like kills creativity. Um, and so I just kind of reminded myself that, hey, the people you're raising money from are already rich. Like if you lose 10K, 100K, $1 million, if they were able to give you that money, then they were able to lose it. Um, and so, one, don't raise money from people who are going to miss that money. But two, then like feel the freedom that comes with knowing that these people are already really wealthy and can afford to lose that money. That was a huge one for me. Again, just to kind of free my mind and allow myself to be creative and take risks. Like you need to be able to take risks.
Yeah, I think that that's a great realization where you are making a trade with these people. They are giving you cash in exchange for equity. And the reason they're doing that is because they're okay with the level of risk. And then on the point of stress, you make a really good point about how most people don't realize, but when you're under deep stress or anxiety, it's like a tourniquet on your brain where there is actually less blood going to your brain, more blood going to your extremities. So that way your body can go into fight or flight in case there's a tiger or something urgent that you need to escape from. You're not going to think as clearly or creatively when you're under deep stress or negative emotion. And when we are experiencing those emotions, it can feel like we need to just dive more into work, like what you were saying about just spending more time in the studio. But by taking a step back, letting yourself calm down, you'll actually be able to then think more clearly and come up with better solutions than you would have otherwise.
Yeah, agreed. And I think like the biggest like lesson I learned is you just gotta like trust your gut. One of the things I failed to do, one of the things that I did with Canary was when I had these advisors and I had these investors, I would ask them for their thoughts on strategy and their thoughts on what we should build and things like that. And I feel like a lot of that was just following what other people wanted. But again, that's not why they gave me money. They invested in me because they believed in me. And I think that was another realization too. After Canary and kind of doing a post-mortem of it, seeing like what I could have done better and could have done worse, I kind of vowed to myself that whenever I do something again in the future, like I'm always just going to listen to my gut, and especially creatively and what I'm doing or strategy or anything like that. Not to say I'm not going to listen to people I work with, but I don't need an investor telling me what to do. Like they gave me their money to because they believe in me. Um, so yeah, that was another big learning, and then lastly, like I've mentioned throughout this, it's just build stuff that people want, whether it's content that people want to watch, whether it's a product that people would actually use. It doesn't matter. Just stay hyper focused on the customer experience. There's all these other things that you can think about: click through rates and average watch time and colors I'm wearing when I'm recording myself, and like what am I saying specifically to these bar managers. All of that can be overlooked with a product that like absolutely just crushes it and is solving a problem. And so like that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, 2 points I want to piggyback off of. One, I think one thing you did, which was really smart, was your post mortem. I know in software development, we have sprint retrospectives, where after you do a bunch of work, you take a step back and you try to examine what went right and what went wrong. I think that this is something people can bake into their lives, not just with business, but with other areas, where maybe once a month on my calendar, I have a post mortem and I can examine the past month, each of my areas, maybe fitness, health, relationships, see what I want to double down on and see what I want to maybe improve on. So it's valuable for people to start to examine what they've been doing, and that way they can improve upon it. And then the second thing that I want to touch on is that, again, going back to beginner entrepreneurs versus more experienced, I know when I was starting my business early on, back when I was, say, maybe 19, starting my first business, similar to you, where you get a lot of feedback and advice from everyone and you don't really know what to listen to. But then as you get more experienced, you really listen to or learn to listen to your internals, to your gut. So it's valuable to get feedback, but don't just blindly follow feedback. Take it, think it over, apply a critical lens to it, and then decide what fits your unique situation. Work backwards from first principles. Does this advice make sense to me, and why am I going to follow it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the famous quote too with like Henry Ford is like, if I asked people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse, not a car. And that's how you kind of take it to the next level. Just sometimes it's just good to trust your gut.
Amen, man. Yeah, both in business and in life. Now, one more topic I want to cover before we jump into our wrap up questions is relationships. I know that for a lot of people, especially ambitious high achievers, relationships can be a very big topic where it can deeply affect everything you do. I wanted to learn a little bit more about your perspective on relationships, what's important to you now and how that might have evolved over time. And I can share a little bit of my thoughts on that as well as we go.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, I can kick us off. So I think when you're younger, early 20s, like I was in like a longer 5 year relationship. I didn't think I thought about like values and like what was important to me or what wasn't important to me. I was like, all right, this was a relationship that started in college. We were kind of having a good time, and like that was kind of it. Like, didn't really think too much about it. I think that's good for like a lot of things, but then you kind of start going through different aspects of life. For me, it was the startup thing, and really looking for someone to like support me kind of more heavily. Um, Not to say that relationship wasn't great, can't say anything bad about them, but people just have different needs as they kind of progress through life. And so when I think about relationships now, a lot of it is focused around support and caring and just kind of being there for someone, right? Like being that kind of support system for you. I think that's super important for me, especially being someone who creates things, right? And has crazy like ups and downs as you go through the entrepreneurial journey, and someone to just kind of level you out and being like, oh shit, this sucked, or oh shit, this was great. um and just to kind of add that like added confidence. Jake, do you ever feel like that you didn't have support when you were doing something, or do you agree that like support's a big part of it for you?
Yeah, man, I definitely think that my perspective on relationships has changed over the years. Where I think about how when we're younger, you might be like, oh, this girl or guy is so cool. They play video games or they skateboard, where you start off on more superficial interests. But then as you grow, it gets to a lot deeper level where does this person share my values? Are they growing in the same direction I am? And I think you highlight a great topic or a great point about support, where if you're someone who's a high achiever, always pushing yourself, like with entrepreneurship, it can be a very high contact sport. And you need someone sometimes who will be there to lift you up, make you feel good on those bad days. And having that support system is extremely helpful both in business and in life, where your life partner is your teammate in everything you do. And you want a teammate who you can communicate well with, collaborate with, and who you can problem solve with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's super attractive when someone's really driven, wants to kind of take things to the next level. Um, because again, that's kind of what I want to do. I think I'd have trouble being with someone who is just kind of happy in their day to day life. They don't have to go start a company, but ideally, like looking to climb a corporate ladder if that's what they want to do, or start a business if that's what they want to do. Like whatever it is that you want to do, like I would want to be with someone who can excel at that, and who wants to conquer that, because I feel like at the end of the day, that's kind of the goals that I have is I want to do this thing and I want to be great at it and I want to kind of master it, and then I'll move on.
Yeah. And one point that I want to highlight is that you went about finding someone whose goals match yours, or that's what's important to you. And I think that there's no right or wrong in relationships. Everyone lives life their way, but you need someone who's a good fit for you. If you are a person who particularly likes chasing goals and self growth, you need someone who's on the same wavelength as you. If you're someone who wants to travel the world, it might not work as well for you if your partner just wants to stay hunkered down on their laptop at home for 40, 60 hours a week. The main point I'm trying to make is know what's important to you and find someone who shares that, and know that there is no right or wrong, but don't feel bad about wanting what you want and needing what you need.
Yeah, and also don't try to overcomplicate things too. Like I had a very short relationship with someone who's awesome and who's a friend, and I love, but it just didn't work out. But on paper, it was great. Like I'm an entrepreneur, she's an entrepreneur. I'm a musician, she's a musician. We had very similar interests in the activities we like to do, and all these things like just seemed to like work. Like on paper it was great, like she's very attractive, all these things, but we had a lot of this like similar values, but sometimes things just like don't click, and that's okay too. And so I think kind of going back to the entrepreneurial thing, like sometimes you just need to trust your gut. I think like we should be critical in our relationships, especially with like partners that we choose, but I also think that at the end of the day, like if it feels good and it feels easy, not to say relationships aren't or are always going to be easy, but if it just feels right, like I think you should just kind of follow your gut with that.
Yeah, I think relationships are one area where you succeed by minimizing regret. The relationship you're in is one that you want to enjoy being in your whole life. And the more you can listen to your gut, the less you will regret a situation and the more you'll enjoy it. So I know that with business and in other areas, you can use strictly logic to solve problems. But this is one area where you need to practice working the other side of your intelligence, kind of seeing what your gut says. Does this feel right? Does this feel like something that fits my day-to-day life and improves it versus making it more challenging?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think like people, when you have a relationship, they either take energy away from you or they give you energy. And I think that alone is a good litmus test for people to evaluate their relationships. I know I see a lot of relationships that uh, other people have that I've kind of spectated, and it's clear that they're both taking energy from each other versus kind of just like pumping them up. So yeah, that's something that I kind of use to kind of gauge how I think it's going.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. I think now is a good time to jump into a few of our wrap up questions. So, first question I want to ask is, what does success mean to you and why? I know that a lot of us can have different definitions of success, and I wanted to see what yours is.
Yeah, my definition of success isn't tied to monetary value. It isn't even tied to like usage for a product or anything like that. I think for me, success is having a vision of where you want to be and working towards that goal. If it's every day, if it's every week, whatever it is, like you have to understand there's only so many things you can control. You can create an awesome product and it doesn't have product market fit. You could create great content and it's not successful. Like those aren't the money and views aren't good metrics for success. I did 100, like I said, 150 million views, as I've said like multiple times now. Like, and that doesn't matter because I wasn't happy doing it. So who the fuck cares? It doesn't matter.
Dude, I love that. And I definitely agree that a lot of living a successful life is about knowing what goals matter most to you, despite what anyone thinks, and working towards them, letting yourself fully enjoy the ups and downs and getting fulfillment from them. A lot of people can think that success means just sipping pina coladas on the beach, but that can get pretty boring pretty quickly. A lot of the meaning and fulfillment in life comes from facing challenges, overcoming them, and learning who you are when adversity strikes.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Nick. The last two questions I have for you are one, any last minute parting advice for the audience? And then two, where can people get in touch with you if you do want them to reach out?
Cool. Yeah, yeah. Parting advice would be go do something. Like go do something cool. I try to follow this rule where if I've thought about doing something for more than 3 or 4 times, doesn't matter the time span. Like I just go do it. I thought about like, oh, maybe I would really like breakdancing. I thought about that a couple times, and I started taking breakdancing classes. And so if you have these things, like I was like, oh, I want to go take French classes, learn French, start taking French classes. So if you have these things, like we all have these things in the back of our head that we think about that for what we want to do or ideas we have. Um, and I think a lot of times they just like go ignored. If you want to go write a children's book, go write a children's book. It doesn't matter. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. If you thought of something that you want to do and you've thought about it more than 2 or 3 times, and just go do it and see what happens. There's pretty limited downside. Um, and yeah, and then just like have fun because we're all gonna die. We're just on a floating rock. Nothing really matters, and that's kind of like my personal philosophy. So success, fail, it doesn't matter. Just go out there and have fun.
Love that, man. Yeah, I completely agree. Remember that in the best way, nothing really matters. You get to decide what matters. So, all the heavy weight you're placing on these different things, remember that you're doing that by choice. You don't need to stress over things unless you want to.
Yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, if people want to check me out, I think the best place is on Instagram. It's at underscore Nick O'Hara underscore. I couldn't get the Nick O'Hara
Yeah,
Instagram.
and I'll share your link too in the show notes for everyone.
Cool, cool. Thanks. But yeah, I don't post much there anymore in terms of like actual posts, but sometimes I throw an Instagram story up of something ridiculous or weird or something that's going on in my life. So you might get some entertainment there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. I think that listeners are going to find a lot of value in this episode. So appreciate you joining, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Jake.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode and got some value from it. If you want to hear more content on decision making, thriving in uncertainty, eliminating ambiguity, and regret minimization, as well as other similar topics, feel free to check out my YouTube channel and my website, letsgetreckless.com. And definitely reach out and let me know what you thought about this episode. Improving the show is a continuous process, and your feedback helps me make this better over time and focus more on the content that's most helpful for you. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.